Jerome Roettgers, Jeroettgers. I was born July the 18th, 1924, in Cincinnati, and we lived there about a year, and we moved to Norwood. I lived on 1947 LMA Avenue in Norwood for my, well, until the war, and then I came back and I stayed there until I got married. And I got married in 1951, and then we lived over in the apartment buildings, catty corner from St. Elizabeth's School. Yeah. And after the children were born and the place got so full of cockroaches, we had to get out. I could not stand it no more. And I was getting so that I'd have to get up at night just to kill cockroaches. And so, especially when my daughter was born, the first night one of the first nights when we were back from the hospital, my wife seen a cockroach crawling in her bed, and I said, "We're out of here. We're getting out of here." So that's when, and it just so happened that a good friend of mine, Carl Brinkmeyer, his older sister wanted to sell their house and move out to the suburbs a little bit later. So they had a house down on Baker Avenue, and we looked at it, and I liked it, and I thought we could afford it, which paid $12,000 for the house, and now it's worth I think they charged me for $190,000 for the for the taxes on it now. So, but then my normal childhood, though, when I was in Elm Avenue, was that I went to St. Elizabeth's grade school, at kindergarten through 8, and then from there to Purcell High School for 4 years. And of course, my last year, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and so we just kind of some of the guys left right away at the graduation, but it was only about maybe half a dozen of them, and I was in a draft the following March, and then that's how life changes, you know. I mean, here you are, a little boy, and all of a sudden you're leaving town, and you haven't probably been more than 50 miles for your whole life away from home, and it was a little different, And as I always said, that the thing that changed me more than anything was the food. I like my mom's, and everybody. I guess every soldier probably felt the same way, as far as eating. You know, your grandma's cooking or your mom's cooking. So my grandmother stayed with us. I mean, so, but
I'd like to get just a little more of a sense of the Norwood, though, when you were growing up. I want you to definitely tell me about the war and your kids and stuff. But just, yeah. I mean, were there cars back then in the 20s? How were the streets paved? How were the neighborhoods?
Oh yeah. The streets are all where they are now. I mean, I think they're in worse shape now than they were then. but I mean, you know, we always called it at the Pike. That was Norwood, the main street in Norwood. Well, practically every store that was ever there is gone. I mean, the city hall's in the same place. The police department is moved across the street. They were in the city hall, and they moved across the street, and all the banks are practically gone. And of course, the banks that are there are new ones, and they're the next big project was the Fidelity building there, and the Fidelity Bank building, and actually they were the ones that give us our loan on our house. I mean, my mom and dad had it, my sister had them, and they were. It was, I think, about half Norwood had their loan from Fidelity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember they were quite popular, and I remember the Albers and the A&P up there next to each other, which I'm sure you.
That was the Albers. Albers was one of the. And the A&P, I think, I'm not sure just which one, but I think the Albert store was the first big store. The rest of them were all neighborhood stores at the corners of the building, and Snyder's grocery store was on Sherman Avenue, and there was at Mills and Carter there was a grocery store, and. Well, that was where the groceries were at usually at the corner, and there was one Jimmy's Tap Room was on the corner, and next to Jimmy's Tap Room was another grocery store, and which is all part of the building down. But there was a Heinz Bakery on the opposite corner where the apartment building is now, and then on the other side. I mean, Pete Hines had a drugstore. No, it's drugstore.
Right. Yep.
Drugstore, and then down where like Miking's is right now, it was always seemed to be a store in there that a mechanic, a shop for cars, and the cars, most of them, the ones that I can remember, go back to about maybe 1928, and the man next door to us there on March or on Elm was he worked at Chevrolet plant. That was one of the biggest things in Norwood at that time. Fisher Body and the Chevrolet plant, General Motors, and practically everybody in town and it really built up Norwood, I guess. And then, of course, there was a few other factories in Norwood, but most of them are all gone now. I mean, Alice Chalmers, Remington Rand, gosh, I don't know, just Henderson was up there. That's where A&P come in up there on. There was an opening between Albers and A&P, and it was a place that sold ice cream during the summertime, and it looked like a igloo. It had snow. It was all painted white, and it had icicles that were sticking up and hanging down, and right across from the park. And the park was a big thing because that's where our swimming pool was. And later on, they built the swimming pool over on Norwood Avenue. Was it Norwood Avenue? Over next to the
Waterworks.
Waterworks, right?
But the one in Victory Park was
there first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they claim that they built that. It was an ice skating rink at one time, before my time, and then later on during the Depression is where people used to go to get their free bags of groceries and stuff like that. For a lot of places you worked gave you vouchers, and you use that to buy food with, and it was. And then later on, it became the safety lanes where they checked cars for brakes and different things, and after going to Purcell High School, and then after the war, we came home, and I worked at the Norwood safety lane. A friend of mine knew us, and he asked me when I got home if I wanted a job, and I worked there for a while, and I went to Xavier University for 3 years, and then I got an opportunity to go into the business. Down at the bottom of Mills Avenue was a place called Modern Builders, and after there was a big boom after the war of houses being built, and places where a lot of people used to go hunting, including myself, out in Deer Park. It became Dillon Vale, and they just kept branching out all over the place. And we shot big home building projects, and because the GIs all had coming back home, got married and started having a family, and they all wanted houses. And with the GI Bill of Rights, they could, get the money to buy their houses, and so that's what happened to a lot of the young people in Norwood at that time. Of course, I was a homebody, and I said, "If I leave, it'll probably take me out in a box." So.
That's great. Now, you grew up Catholic.
Right.
You grew up Catholic. Can you talk a little bit about being Catholic here in Norwood?
Well, there was St. Elizabeth's was right up at the top of right at Carter and Mills, or Carter and Mills, yeah. And the school was on the next block, which was Cortland and Carter. And then across the main Montgomery Road up there was St. Matthew's Church and school. And then up on the hill was St. Peter and Paul Church and school. And then there was, it was Allison High School and Allison Street for, not high school, but grade school for the public schools, and Sharpsburg and Williams, and I think the last one to be built was over on, what was it? On
Northwood or
North. That was North Norwood. That was there. That was one of the older ones. The one was off of. Oh gosh, what was the name of the? It's down from St. Elizabeth, Drex Avenue, off of. I'm from St. Matthew.
That's all right. We don't have to name them all.
Yeah. But St. Peter and Paul down below there. What was that? Sharpsburg? No, that wasn't Sharpsburg. That was.
But tell me a little bit about, like, you had the Catholic kids and the Protestant kids. Did everybody get along?
Oh yeah. Heck, a lot of my friends, all my friends. Well, there was a little rivalry all the time in sports, in different sports, and we all made up our own games. I mean, we weren't paid. We didn't have a coach or anything like that. We just, well, you get up a team, I'll get up a team. We'll play you next Saturday up at Norwood High School, and that was the high school that a lot of the, there was 10 years in there that was a depression, and it was kind of rough. I mean, a lot of fathers didn't have jobs, they lost jobs, and I can remember my dad, every time he'd bring a check home, he was a printer. My mother would look at it and say, "Oh my God, Joe, they took out more money. They took out more money. They give you got less. You got less." And we made it through. And like most of them, they all made it through. But it wasn't as easy as you think. I don't know whether people nowadays, if they had to do that, I think they would be kind of griping a little bit,
I bet.
I mean, and then I guess it was, my uncle, my dad's brother, he had a fairly decent job. People still smoked if they, and he was a superintendent at Eyeballs Cigar Place downtown, and he bought a new radio and he gave my dad his old radio, and that was our first thing about radios, and that was one of the things, we'd be able to listen to it on Sunday night, maybe Amos and Andy, and that was I think every night on the local station, WLW, or I don't remember what station it was, but this local station, WKRC, they're all still there. That was there when, and on Sundays they would usually have like Eddie Cantor. I don't know if you remember, anybody ever remember Eddie Cantor? The older people would probably, and the trouble of it is there is not many older people like as old as I am, but around Norwood anymore.
Yep.
But
now, were you an altar boy, Jerry, when you were?
Oh yeah. Most of us, as we went through St. Elizabeth, we got up into the we started when we was in the sixth grade, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. We were you were like there always was 6 people in mass, and you'd be two sixth graders, 2 seventh graders, 2 eighth graders, yeah. And then you as you grew up, you got to be the head, he was a big shot then. He was the head server, But and of course you had to know your Latin too. That was one thing that everything was answered in Latin then, not in like it is now. It's all American or and it's becoming Spanish too.
Yeah,
yeah.
It is.
But.
And then what about your years at Purcell? How was that for you?
Well, the years at Purcell was we all played a sport of some time. I remember I went out for football in my first year and a freshman, and they changed coaches at that time, and this guy's name was Bernie McCashin, and he wasn't a very good coach. And he told me, he said, he laughed at me when I came. I weighed 108 pounds. He said, come back again when you grow up, buddy. I said, you had your chance to get me, But I said, I'll never play football for you as long as you're here. And I didn't. But we used to form teams on gym. We'd take the non-football players and play against the football players, and it would be strictly tag football. But I think we had better players that weren't on the team than we did or were on it. But that was up on Hackberry Street in Walnut Hills. So, but and then I don't work too. I mean, I had everything that I made. My mom got 90% and I got 10%. I mean, I'm on the first job I had. I delivered shopping news on Thursdays, and it was about a 3-hour job. I guess I deliver papers over in Bond Hill. The worst part was walking back and forth from Bond Hill to back home, and I made $1 a week, and I would get 10 cents of that, and my mom would get the other 90 cents. She had to have it. I mean, of course, she say, "You want to eat?" You bet. But and there was always, every time somebody would go to the grocery store, there was never any bones around, because everybody that bought the meat from the butcher would want a bone with it, because that's what bone was to make. And it didn't make any difference whether there was any meat on it or not. There usually wasn't. But I mean, it did make a good soup bone,
Sure.
And if you had a dog, that'd be his meal.
That's right. That's great. So now, did you get married first or go to the war first? You went to the war first.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
Well, when we got out of high school, they didn't want us, and there was jobs that were open, like in the in the war industry, but they didn't want us guys because they knew we were going to get drafted, and and sure enough, I mean, they had each city had what they called a draft board set up, and each month they would get a quota that they had to fill, like maybe 15, 20 guys, maybe. It's according to, I think they try to do the best they could with it, as far as some towns didn't have very many people, Norwood there was a lot of kids in Norwood, and they had when I was drafted in March. Well, that's when I went, but I was of the next year in '43, and it was I would say probably there was 2 drafts that month. There was one on a Saturday and one on a Monday.
Wow.
And a lot of my friends went on Saturday, and a lot of them went on Monday. And we went over to Fort Thomas over in Kentucky, and we would line up, and the Army and the Navy and the Marines and the Air Force, and they would come by, and they'd say, "I want this guy," and then it would be their pick and their pick and their pick. And I remember the one fellow that was next to me, he he said, I hope they don't don't put me in the Marines. I hope they don't put me in the Marines. Well, it come by, and he was a little taller than I was, and probably weighed maybe another 5-10 pounds more than I did. And it was the Navy's turn to pick, and they were like 3 or 4 away, and they took a guy, and then the Air Force took a guy, and then the Marine. It was the Marines, him or the Army. So he takes the Marine guy says, "Yeah, I'll take him." So the Marines took him, and he almost shit in his pants. And so then so I was in the Army. You had no choice at that time, unless you enlisted before time, you know.
Sure.
And most of them waited until they were drafted anyway. But there was a lot of them that enlisted that you didn't, and if you could pass their tests. And I tried the Air Force, and the guy said, "I'm sorry, son, but your teeth is my second. A lot of my second teeth were coming in, and they said your teeth is kind of, or they're too rotten." I said, "I just want to fly an airplane and shoot them, not bite them." And the guy said, "Well, I'm sorry, but we can't use you." So I ended up going into the Army.
And then you did go to the war. You went over to Europe, correct?
Yeah. After we got a new division started in Camp Landing, Florida, and it was there were several new divisions that the Army had. The Army had a regular divisions, and they had new divisions for the war. The war was getting heavier and heavier, so they started a new division, and we trained, went through basic training, went through second phase of training, and we were all set after the second phase. That was going all the way up through into maneuvers and everything, you know. And from there we went to 3 different camps: Camp Landing, and then Camp Robinson in Arizona, or in Arkansas, and then we went to down to Camp Rucker in Alabama. And but while we were in Arkansas, we were down to where we were making 25-mile hikes every Friday night, and we were ready. I mean, it's no doubt. I mean, they couldn't make us any readier than we were, and that was right before the D-Day, and I'd say about a month before D-Day, and they came around, and in the meantime, I had gotten to be a sergeant. I was a squad leader, and they called us all our non-commissioned officers, and they called us all in and said, "You want to pick out all the we need half of your." I had 12 men under me. We need half of your men, and so I thought, "Oh Jesus, this is going to be an awful hard job to pick out 6 guys that I've been with for over a year and a half now, and we were all kind of like brothers, you know. At that time, you're sleeping with them, you're out with them, you're doing everything with them, and I said, oh gosh, how am I going to do that?" So anyway, I went back and I called them all together, and I said, I got a hard thing to do, and I said, I don't exactly know how to do it, but I've got to pick out 6 of you guys that have to go as replacements, because only thing I could figure was it was they were going to take half of our division, which was well trained, and ship them as replacements for D-Day, because that way they wouldn't have had to ship any of our equipment. They just shipped them in, and they would be ready, And so anyway, I said, but I'll tell you what, I'll let you volunteer and see if I can get 6 of you to volunteer. So what happens? All 12 of them volunteer. So now I said, now you made it damn more tougher on me than I had before. Now all of you want to go, and so I got down to where we're picking straws. And the guys that picked the longest straw, I'd go, and I get 3 more guys, and they'd pick one, and they all were satisfied, I guess. But then some of the guys that weren't picked, actually wanted to trade with the other guys to go. So, and these are all, our division was 21 years old. I mean, that was what the average age of I mean, that's counting all the old guys and everything that were there, and I mean, it was 21 years. That was the average. So we were pretty young, and of course well, so what happens? We get another half a division, or not a half a new men came, and they were starting to get to these draft boards. Were starting to get to the bottom of their barrel. In fact, they were getting to old guys that shouldn't even have been there. I mean, like guys that are almost 38 years old, and had families. In fact, I got one of the new men I got was 38 years old. He was a butcher, and he had his trigger finger cut off. And how in the hell he was going to pull a damn trigger with no finger? So anyway, I messed around with the first sergeant, and he was kind of a buddy of mine, and we managed to get him into the kitchen, and he worked in the kitchen until we went overseas, and then they sent him home because he had, besides that, he had varicose veins. So they had sent a guy with varicose veins, no trigger finger. So they were he said, they just don't have nobody at my draft board. I said, they sure as hell mustn't have it. I said, what are they going to do, bring women next time? And, but, well, we filled up the division again, we had to retrain go through the whole damn thing again. Not they had their basic training, but they didn't have the rest of their training. We had to go through all that, and so. But one story I remember, we had a lieutenant, and he wanted to go to town. He got all dressed up, and I said, that's okay. And so he said, Red or Jerry, whatever they called me, that's what either my name I had to go by. And he said, I want you to do my job. Shoot this azimuth course. And azimuth course is with a compass, you take a sight on something, so you walk out 50 yards this way, then you take another sight 50 yards that way, 20 yards this way. It just goes this way, just to zigzag it, like you needed it for for patrols, and I mean, so you don't get lost in a lot of places because it's all, and he came just as we were finishing up, and we had had a lot of rain previous to that, and so he said, "Well, let me take a couple walks and see if you did it right." So he sets it up and he had it, and he walks about 25 yards and he disappears. Oh shit! What happened to him? When a kitchen was out, when a group of guys was out in the kitchen, the kitchen dug a hole for their garbage, and they were supposed to cover that up. Well, evidently, maybe they got caught in the rain pretty bad, and they left this hole there. And this guy walks in, he falls in his tent. He's ready to go to see his wife, all dressed up, spruced up, with his suntans, and down he goes. And he comes up, and he's got potato peelings, and all that kind of garbage hanging all over him. He was so mad. He said, "You did that on purpose." I said, "No, I didn't." I said, "I just stood there and said, walking off 25, and how the first guys missed it, I don't know, but they did." And so, but I mean, there was funny stuff along with some other stuff too. But it was, and then we moved down to Camp Rucker, Alabama, and they took another, well, not quite 50% of our men, but they took quite a few of them. And I was gone then. I was on special duty, and I didn't have to pick any guys. They just took them. So, but we got new guys, and these guys were, the Army had a program that was ASTP. It was an Army Specialized Training Program, and if you had an IQ of 110 or 120, I'm not positive exactly, that would qualify you to take this test. And if you pass these tests, college examine, a test, and they would put you in and train you for whatever they needed for special stuff, and most of the stuff nobody knew about. Anyone know what were, but they just abolished it at that time because I guess they were going to have the they had D-Day by then, and so they needed more men than they did guys pushing a pencil. So they got these guys, and oh Christ, they've been in the Army and was living in hotel, or in not hotel, but in college campuses and eating like kings and that, and then they come put them in the infantry. They were terrible. They were mad. They were always bitching, and but then in October they told us to get ready, and we were going to go. We went up to New York, got on a ship, went over to England. We were there for till actually it was the Battle of the Bulge started in January, or not in January, about December the 16th, 1944. It started. We were one of the only full divisions left in so they knew we were on call, and so Christmas Eve they took the 262nd and the 263rd our infantry regiments, and they boarded the ship. It was called the SS Leopoldville, and we got word the next day that we were leaving, That was Christmas Day. We were actually walking around town, and when they said the MPs came out and the armed guys that we run into said, "Get back to camp. You're going to leave in 2 hours." And then we boarded the ship in Southampton, and then we find out that our troop ship that left the day before, that night they got torpedoed, and we lost 800 men before they even got to England. So we were kind of beat up division then. So then they sent us down to Saint Nazaire, France. We were the only regiment left afterwards. We made we loaded, like I say, we loaded the ship on Christmas, and then it was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the captain said, I remember him saying, "We're going to leave as soon as it gets dark, and we're going to make a mad dash across." He said that way to know that we should be able to miss most of the subs that might be around. And we, holy shit, maybe we were actually getting into the war, you know. So he said we'll be in total blackout, and he said we'll get there about to France and Cherbourg. He said in about 2:30 in the morning. So sure enough, that's about what we did. But if you read that, you've seen more about where we were sunk.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, and the worst part of that I always thought was everybody that knew anything about that was sworn to secrecy. It was on that ship, and they were not allowed to tell anything about it until what was it, 1994, when the freedom of speech or whatever the heck they call it,
Wow.
came out, and the I always thought a lot of the parents of those kids all died in the meantime, and never knew exactly whatever happened to their unless they got a German newspaper, because the guy said, hell, 3 days after the ship was sunk, it was in the news in the German newspaper over there that they had sunk a shipload of kids going to the Battle of the Bulge, and they bragged about everything that they could possibly, and but so then when Patton split up the German armies and sent some of the Germans went to the French coast, and some of them went to Germany, headed to Germany through Belgium, and the ones that went to the coast thought they could get out and go around the Mediterranean Sea and come into Germany the back way, But the Americans had the seaports so blockaded, and so did the English, that they would have sunk anything that comes in and out. And the place where we went to was Saint Nazaire, and that was a big U-boat fortress, and they had room for, I don't know, I forget, 3 or 4 that supposedly they could come in under the water and come in and then raise in this big fortress, raise up inside, but they weren't getting in and out either. At least the Germans said, we'll sink everything that comes out. I mean, the Americans did. And they said, well, they want to send some of their wounded back to, and they figured, well, they're going to send regular soldiers back and put bandages on them, So they said, if you come out, we're going to sink you too. So they didn't and then, and we had 40,000 Germans in this pocket, like, and we were 3,000 guys trying to hold 40,000, but we had some French troops. They weren't anywhere, and and we had some extra long guns that were attached to us, and we were a little bit better, but they weren't trying to break through anyway, because if they did, our Air Force at that time would have annihilated them before they got any orders, because we had air superiority and they didn't.
Yeah, by the time of the Bulge,
yeah,
they were in trouble.
Yeah, oh yeah, they were in bad shape.
Well, tell me about meeting your wife and having a family.
You know, it was funny. This one time, we were home, and well, let me tell you this before I get.
Sure.
We were in town, like I don't know, it was about a week before we were gonna leave. We didn't know we were gonna leave, even know where we were gonna leave, and this lady, we had heard about her. She was I guess a psychic, you know. And they said the people in this town used to pattern their lives after a little village. Used to pattern their lives off this lady. So me and my buddy, we said, let's go in there and see her once, you know. And so we go in, and I don't know what she told him, but she told me, she said, you know, she says, you're going to be a very lucky fella. I said, soldier. And so she said, you think you're going to the west, but that would have been towards Germany, Bulge, or you're gonna end up going to the east. That's before the ship got sunk or anything, you know. This is a week before, and she said, and I had a Purcell ring on, and I turned it around to make it look like I was married, and I kept flashing it in front of her so she'd see it, and she said, you're going to be home in June, July, this early part of the summer. And then she said, and then in a few years you're going to meet this girl, and her initials are, she says, I'm not sure, it's GH or JH or something like that. She said, and you're going to be very lucky. And so I never did ever tell anybody about it. I did a few years back, but damn, what does it turn out to be? Our ship gets sunk. We don't go to the west. We went to the east coast. The war is over in Europe, and after I was a prisoner, that, you know, they sent us home as soon as we were liberated. About several weeks we got home. I get home the last week in June. Several years later, well, actually about 4 years later, something like, I'm at a picnic, and I always used to tease Ginny about it. I meet Ginny. Her name's G.H., Ginny Holmes. Virginia was her name, but everybody called her Ginny. Her mother and some of her relations called her Jenna. But she, I said we were playing. We used to go Brink, Carl Brinkmeyer, and we until we got him and Dick Kemper, the three of us would run around together and played ball together and everything else for 4 or 5 years after the war, and actually we all got married about the same time. Dick was a little later than us. We were about 6 years after the war. We get married, and so this little girl was standing on third base. I was playing third base, and she was on the just sitting there watching the game just by the third base. And I said, "Hey kid," I said, "run over and get me a beer, will you?" And that was free beer, you know. And so I said she always ran as fast as her legs would carry her. She'd run over and get that beer. And so, you know, we start going out together. In fact, I met her before that down at Jimmy's. I met her mom and dad before I met her. And I don't know if you remember George Buttafuoco.
Sure.
George, he knew the parents real well, and that's how he was with me the night we went in Jimmy's, and shit, they were, but and she had just graduated, and then we waited until she was 21, and we got married when she was 21. But what else?
Fun. And then what about you? You did have a few children, as I recall.
Yeah, had 7 of them. 5 boys and 2 girls. The girls are the engine and the caboose. One and five cars in the middle.
I'm not sure you're even allowed to say that these days. No, I'm just kidding. That's fine. So I've been telling people for years, you know, you get married, and that's a change, but the real change comes when you have kids, because that's when you have to make all your different life decisions. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, when your kids were young, and you were here on Baker Street, I guess?
Yeah, it was. It's a making $60 a week, paying for the house, paying for all the things that pop up that you don't know, you know, you never expect it, you know. You got to look out for them, like like anything. Your television set goes bad. Of course, we didn't have a television set then. It took, I guess, I don't know, I think we were married about 3 years before we had a television set, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things when I was captured on that patrol, I had a wristwatch on, and I had my arms up in the air, and I unhooked the wristwatch and let it slide down my jacket, and they never did get it from me. And when Donna was born, she was probably, well, walking. She could climb the stairs, and I took a bath. We didn't have a shower up there then. We got one now, but I took my watch off and I forgot it, and went on down the stairs, and I heard her say something, and I heard the toilet flush, and I had my watch. I went upstairs. Sure enough, Well, the Germans couldn't get the watch away from him, but she flushed it down the toilet. Oh, my watch! You know, it was one of those ones that I think it was called an Elgin or something, and you can see it at night. You know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It was. It was. Right.
So I don't know too much about your girls, but I know your boys are athletic. Was athletic?
They
games were always part of the life growing up.
Yeah, Tommy was a good baseball player. So was Steve. Joe played baseball, and they all played a little bit of football too. And Jimmy was kind of the smallest one of the ones, and he Dave played ball too, but Jimmy wrestled, and but they all they did something, but
Hey, they're good kids. They're good members of the community.
Yep.
And I don't know. For me, that's one of the joys of my life is knowing that at least I did a reasonably good job of raising my two kids. So.
Yeah, you know these days you've got to worry. I mean, it's no doubt about. I mean, there's so many things that pop up, you know, and when you I think probably the depression that we went through, everybody, and they knew that what they were getting wasn't given to them, that they had to go out and earn it, you know. And it's not like, hey, Dad, lend me $10. $10, Jesus. Of course, like you do now, you know. I need some gas, you know. There wasn't no car to have gas in. One car, if that family had a car, they were doing good, you know.
Yeah. But, and then more recently, I know you got grandkids. Can you talk a little bit, just because I think it's kind of interesting, about what it was like for Brandon to join the family?
Well, Brandon just joined the family. I mean, we met him. I met him when he was in high school, and he's a very, very nice young fella. Brought up very, just like we were. I mean, you know, and I mean, he just fit in, you know, and of course, I don't know how it would have been if the world had been backtracked a while, but I mean, everything's hunky dory, you know.
Well, this I'm probably a little sensitive to it because when it's probably about the mid '70s, my sister Judy was starting to see an African American guy, and Dad had a fit and said they weren't going to do that. Now, you know, you let 20, 30 years go by, that helps, but you didn't have any issues with them?
No, hell no. I mean, I mean, some of my best friends were, you know, I mean, I didn't care what color they were, what race they belonged to, or anything. I mean, it's a person. It's a person, you know. I mean, you can be a good guy, you can be a bad guy, you know.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Just glad to hear it coming out of your mouth. Now tell me about the golf league. You've been golfing for a good while.
Yeah. I don't know how, I don't know what, I'm trying to think of who was the head of the golf when I started. I think was it
Coxie, maybe? I'm not sure who ran it before Jerry.
Coxie was playing in it.
I know he was over there enough.
It was Fireman, left-hander.
Wouldn't have been the Plogman. I know Bobby Plogman.
No, I don't know. Probably back in the 70s, but I'm not sure just exactly.
Well, yeah, we'll just start talking about how you know.
It didn't. Let's see. I know I start playing with Whitey Pullman. I don't know if you remember Whitey.
Remember the name?
Yeah. We in fact, when I first started playing, we played every Saturday. Or that, if it was, in fact, there could have been snow and ice from where they slid on a thing, and we were still out there playing golf. I mean, and then of course that was my half a day off. We played 9 holes. Usually, if it was too bad, I mean, but we did play almost every day we had a chance, or every Saturday we had a chance. He was a pretty good golfer.
And let's see. I guess most of your boys play golf.
Yeah, they all played.
Oh, okay.
A little bit. I mean, Tommy could hit it for the furthest in the woods. But he played more, ball.
Mm-hmm.
They all played softball. I mean,
Sure.
I mean, that was West Norwood's gift to the world. Every time a guy was old enough to play softball, he'd be joining the CYMC. Remember?
And there are games down Milcrest almost every night.
Is there? Yeah. Yeah. When I came back from overseas, I had a 90-day leave because they didn't know what to do with us yet. They had prisoners that were actually the camp that we went to after they relieved us, or when the war was over, and we went. Eisenhower thought there might be about 10,000 prisoners at this camp, and he thought that at this one camp that they had, or they named them after cigarettes. So we was at Camp Lucky Strike, and they had made plans for 10,000 troops, and there was over 70,000 of them. See, the ones that went down with the planes, there was they didn't know whether they lived or died. A lot of them, they see them parachuted, but they don't know whether they lived or and same way with the Battle of the Bulge. There was so many guys that they didn't know what happened to them. In fact, they probably don't know what happened to them to this day. But I mean, it's a direct hit on something, and there's nothing left. I mean, I'm reading this book here, and it's got this guy seen his lieutenant, and he said, "What the hell is that?" And he had this guy somehow or other. One of the guys that was hit by him by a shell close to him. Had his guts all over his body. I mean, his shirt. It's
Oh, had to be gruesome, horrifying. What else? You mentioned it. So you got involved in the lumber business after World War II, and
yeah. I was at a KSC meeting, Knights of Columbus, and there was Carl Gravy was there, and he said, "Does anybody want a job?" I was going to school then, and I wasn't too happy about it. Really, to tell you the truth, I felt I knew more about it than the teachers that were teaching me. Some of them were young kids, and so come down and see me. So I went down and see him. So that's how I started. It was down at Modern Builders. Started off as like a bookkeeper and ended up as a salesman for them. And then when they closed, then we went down to Cordis Lumber Company because in fact, the same guy hired me twice. He left there and went down to Cordis, and he called me. And when he heard that they were closed, and he said, "You want to come down here?" I said, "Yep." So actually, I left one job on a Saturday and started the next one on a Monday. So I didn't miss any time.
Didn't even get a vacation out of it.
No. And it was.
What else you want to tell me, Jerry? I think we got a lot of your life, but is there? What else has been important to you?
Just being alive, friends. It's that's one of the main reasons I just stayed in Norwood is because I had so many friends, and that it was worthwhile to me to. Maybe I'm just a homebody,
Well, there's a lot of homebodies in Norwood, and I think it's terrific. We talk about this golf league and golfing with guys who we went to school with, golfing with guys we've known for 20 years. Most communities aren't that rooted, don't have that sense. So there's something weird about Norwood in that way.
But that was probably, I often think of I mean, I've got 7 children, and they're all here. And there's people that's got 2 children. One of them is in California, and one of them's in New York. It's just, and I don't think I would have liked that at all, to have the family split up all over the world. And it's all right if they make trips like that, work for jobs but it's just, I guess it's in you, or I don't know. What's that? How's the old story go? You can take the
person out of the country, but you can't. You can take the person out of the Norwood, but
you can take.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you can take the boy out of Norwood, but you can't take the Norwood out of the boy.
That's right.
So.
Anything else you want to share?
No, they don't want to hear about my war stories.
Well, we got a few, and I'm tickled to see that a lot of that stuff is documented. So, we may want to put it on a website one of these days or something like that.
It's there if anybody wants it. But I mean, she's got it on her computer.
Mm-hmm.
PVO. What do you want? What do you want? Oh, See, we had I guess he wants the our general when we dispersed said that I wasn't there, but he said that he would like for him to start a PVO, Panther Veterans Organization, and so it went on for a little bit. Most of these guys, they were getting married and having families, and they couldn't afford to travel like they did. But then these guys got together and up in the east, and they had about half a dozen of them, and they started the PVO, the organization, and it went up to about pretty close to about 25, almost 2,500 guys, and it's down to about 12 now. And then they started going to little weekend things every year. They'd all meet at a certain place, and it became and then we ended up going to almost any place important in the United States. I got to put a wreath on the tomb of the unknown soldier. I got interviewed about half a dozen times by different places, newspapers and stuff where we've been. The one fellow that was the president of the outfit, I've been known him and been with him for 75 years. And his family, we go see them about 3 times a year. Jim and Priscilla and Susie and whoever, and Ryan and myself and Jenny went before she died, and then in fact, like Jim and Priscilla, they spent last weekend 3 or 4 days I think up at with this couple up in Philadelphia, and they got a place out on the ocean, and a cabin, beach house, and just a lot of friends. You've made more and more friends all the time. And of course, the old guys and their wives are all pretty much dying out. But we've had some. I said, always, you can't take the memories away,